Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Can we just give it another minute or so, and then we shall begin. We just want to let other attendees in. We'll kick off promptly. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues, partners, and friends of the radio industry. Happy World Radio Day, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Ofense Mboweni, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation on behalf of the National Association of Broadcasters and the Media Development and Diversity Agency. So today we'll be joining broadcasters around the world in celebrating World Radio Day under the 2026 UNESCO theme, which is Radio and AI. This theme invites us to reflect on how artificial intelligence is already shaping radio and how we can use it responsibly, creatively, and inclusively across the community, public, and commercial radio sectors. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce today's panelists. We have the CEO of the MDDA, Shoeshoe, Franklin Huizies, who is the NAB's Community Radio Committee Chairperson, Nisa, Allie, the Editor-in-Chief of EWN, Eyewitness News. We also have Kesaris. He is the H.O.D of Consumer Insights, Technology and Innovation at Gagasi FM. And lastly, we have Nkosinathi Ntuli. He is the business manager of Ligwalagwala and Ikwekwezi FM. We are delighted to be with you all today and thank you for joining us. We look forward to all your contributions. I shall now hand over to the Executive Director of the NAB, Nadia Bulbulia, just to welcome us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Fense. Hello and a warm welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you could join us today. We're especially pleased to be doing this in partnership with the MDDA. Thank you so much to Fense and to Aya for putting this together. Most importantly, thanks to every single one of you who are here today as we celebrate an incredible medium that I think we all can agree is kind of the lifeblood of the media sector. A very warm welcome to Shoeshoe, the MDDA CEO, who's going to be the first speaker this morning. And this is obviously under the theme of radio and AI, and a reminder that the A is for artificial. And so I think we need to always remind ourselves of exactly what we mean by these terms, especially in an age where we are very concerned with issues of deep fakes, of cloning, of mis and disinformation, of using these tools in a harmful manner. But I think today the wonderful thing is we're going to be speaking to experts and engaging with experts in the field just to learn a little bit more around how we can use these tools, which are obviously there to make our lives easier, not more difficult. And obviously tools not to take over creativity, not to take over the human capability of exactly what we're doing here right now is communicating with each other. So a warm welcome. We really do want to encourage engagement. So please use the chat function. We also love to see little emojis. We want to have people alert and alive to the conversation. And we also want to raise some critical issues, which I think has become very topical globally, just around how we are using AI and the kinds of safeguards that are required, but also just in terms of what it does for content creation. Many have said we now have an opportunity to use these tools to actually become smarter in a way. I think we are very concerned with certainly the use of these tools in a manner that circumvents what, as I said, as human beings, we are at the very core and essence, communicators. We also need to consider how we use these tools in terms of fact-checking, verification, just how these tools can empower and make easier the work within the services that you provide. But I think today is also an incredible celebration for radio, especially in our country. Last night, we listened to the President in the State of the Nation report, and I think we need to be reminded of the incredible milestones in this country, particularly. It's 30 years of our Constitution. It is 70 years since the Women's March. It is 50 years since the June 76 uprisings. And more importantly, in celebrating our Constitution, we celebrate our rights to freedom of expression, our right to this incredible diversity, our constitutional principles around freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of association. So I think as we have this conversation, we always have to place it within the context of the incredible, incredible values and principles that underpin our democracy. So a huge welcome. Thank you so much again, Ofense. And I hope that Shoeshoe is on the line right now. I know she's traveling and she does incredible work in terms of outreach. So just a fantastic welcome. As I said, please, everyone, some lovely emojis and just keep the chat open so that we can have a conversation. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nadia. CEO, we now hand over to you to kick us off some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Ofense, and thank you to Nadia. I'm trying to use the technology so that I can be seen. I also wanted to just make sure that I'm audible. You will just pardon me, we've had to travel home. I do want to just project the MDDA's branding in the meantime, if it is all agreeable to you, before I get into the presentation. I think today is important for all of us who are here. We are people who love radio. We people who have been touched by radio in different ways. And I think as we remember the impact of radio in the communities that we live in, we must also remember that while the focus this year is AI, many people in many areas across the country are still looking at AI as an abstract idea. I think also what I'd like to highlight that's important is that AI facilitates information and technology. We, the people, that the creators, the makers of content, and those who've chosen the medium of radio continue to ensure that we broadcast and we carry the messages through audio, and which I think really is important. I want to just first, before I get into the the points I'd like to raise, which I think are important, just speak about the MDDA and what anchors us in the mandate of the organization. The Media Development and Diversity Agency was founded through an act of parliament. And what really brings the agency to life are these constitutional guarantees that everyone has a right to freedom of expression and everyone has a right to access information. And to access information, there is a need to have an enabling technology or a tool to be able to give that information. I think often there's little value placed on those who are the facilitators of us being able to access information. And I think this day gives us an opportunity to highlight the importance then of those who enable us to access information, specifically through radio. Since its existence, the MDDA has funded a number of community media projects, but also has provided opportunities for capacity building. I think what I wish to highlight for today's presentation is that recognizing the changes in the sector, the agency is also looking at focusing on digitalizing the community media sector by ensuring that we provide capacity building and we build platforms to enable community media practitioners, more specifically, to be able to access information and the technological tools where they're able to share the information with the various communities that they are serving. It's important to also emphasize the importance of community media. Menadi has already highlighted what makes this year so significant, but we also have the local government elections that are coming up, which are a big opportunity for us to participate as citizens of this country through voting for local government. But I think community media can play an even greater role in facilitating that civic education for us to understand why it's important to vote. Coming on to today's theme in focus as we commemorate and celebrate World Radio Day, and the focus being AI. I think one of the young students I've worked with asked, should we be worried because we are seeing DJs that are now AI, music compilers that are AI. And if you have seen recently on the various social media platforms, you will see that the generative AI tools have become so advanced that they can synthesize your voice with just a few minutes of sampling. And what does this mean for radio broadcasting? Does it mean that the broadcaster you've always loved and heard on radio will be replaced by this new technology? I think we should be drawing even closer to the humanness of radio, the ability to connect authentically in the various communities that we are in, the intimate relationship, which is very unique in how we experience radio, to remember that we will continue to play a big role in radio. I think we should use artificial intelligence. You can even use it to develop a synthetic audio. But I want to say that, again, we should not leave out the importance of creativity, which continues to ensure that we have creative, fresh ideas and interesting information on radio. With the AI and all of the other technologies comes the mis and disinformation challenges. Again, we need the human element. We have Nisa here from EWN, and I think this is a key issue that needs newsroom and editors to be mindful of, and content creators, that you must be able to fact check the information. And I suppose the question to the listeners and those who tune in onto radio for information is, how do we know when something is authentic, is real? Are there tools and ways communities can test the information? And I think with where we are now, your more established broadcasters and community media, because they are licensed, you know for a fact the information you are getting is fact-checked, it's correct, and if it's not correct or it's disinformation, you know exactly where to go and complain. I think as such, I'm saying, yes, there's opportunities with technology, but I'm also saying that there's also these challenges that we need the people that work within these mediums to ensure that we continuously improve our own skills to work on those platforms. I want to conclude by saying that radio is stories that are told through sound. The technology that delivers that sound will change, and it must change because there's innovation where radio can be delivered through just a smart speaker. We do come from a phase where radio was on FM. And so I want to say we should embrace the new platforms and technologies that enable us to continue telling really good stories through sound, and also leverage the opportunities that come with artificial intelligence in ensuring that we improve the way we work and improve efficiency. So we must embrace these opportunities, but let's focus at honing the skills of telling really great radio stories and building resonance and connecting with the audiences that we connect, that we are able to connect with, specifically for community stations in the indigenous languages, some of them recognized in the Constitution, but others very unique to the communities that we all come from.
Thank you very much, CEO. What a lovely presentation, and it definitely gives us a lot to think about. I personally liked how you mentioned retaining creativity and the human element. And now, just to keep it on a community radio theme, we have with us the Community Radio Committee Chairperson of the NAB, Mr. Franklin Huizies. He's here with us at the NAB studio offices. So he shall take over in a bit. Franklin, I now hand over to you, sir.
Studios. The NAB must have the studios.
I think so.
That's a great point, CEO. We'll have to really collaborate on that. We'll have joint studios.
Thank you,
Fancy, I don't
CEO.
think we can see Franklin yet. If he wants to just, is he sitting next to you?
He's right next to me.
Franklin, do you want to just scoot over and then, yeah, if you could just move across so we could see you, please. That'd be lovely.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm just going to be very brief. World Radio Day, I was fortunate to be part of the discussions initially as part of AMAC, and to see it, coming almost a decade now, or just over a decade, is great. So I'm gonna, sorry for my view. I'm facing my laptop at the moment in terms of my notes. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, CEO, MDDA CEO Shoeshoe, and all our distinguished guests. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. So I had two questions to address. I'm gonna just club them together. So we're gonna look at community radio and AI. So community radio in South Africa is rooted in a public value mandate. So our license conditions will say you need to have public engagement, and you need to have proof of that. You need to involve local communities in your programming content. So from that context, and then also from the fact that we are a development state, we are now addressing this question. So how can AI help us with this? Enhance local content quality. I think that's critical. For example, AI-powered audience analytics can analyze listener data from streaming platforms, social media, SMS interactions to identify community interests. So you will see that the focus comes back to how do we capture community interest and how do we filter and factor that into our work in terms of using AI as a tool. So this enables stations to tailor programming that is more relevant, inclusive, and impactful. Imagine discovering through AI that your local youth are interested in entrepreneurship, prompting the creation of a dedicated show. So that analytics will show you, it will point you towards the interest that you've captured out of real data using AI tools. So however, we must ensure that AI does not erode editorial independence or local authenticity. There comes the point raised by Shoeshoe earlier. So local authenticity, very important. So algorithms must be transparent and aligned with our values and fairness, accuracy, and community participation. So we need to make sure that we have input and that we use these tools with our value systems and make sure that that process is transparent. Second point I'm looking at is access to new skills development through strategic partnerships. So you will agree with me that through community radio, we have access to communities at the moment, about 280 licensed stations, meaning 280 communities at least, hopefully 280 districts. And so this obviously gives us access. And so also, if we look at the fourth industrial revolution, reshaping media landscapes, in terms of new media and technology, community radio must not be left behind. So AI adoption offers a unique opportunity to, one, upskill staff and volunteers by partnering with educational institutions, tech companies, sector bodies, and we can provide training in digital literacy, data analysis, and AI ethics. This empower our teams to use AI tools responsibly and creatively. So I think these are just examples of how we can use these tools instead of allowing our AI programming to be managed by AI program. Yeah. So the second bullet there, under access to new skills, we need to bridge the digital divide, and strategic partnerships can help us to access affordable AI solutions and ensure that rural and under-resourced stations are not excluded from technological progress. So obviously there we have UNISA, we have other institutions like universities, tertiary institutions, and even corporate tech companies that we can approach in terms of possible strategic partnerships when it comes to skills. So for example, AI-powered automated transcription translation tools that can transcribe live broadcast and translate them into multiple languages. So if you look at Josie FM, where I'm from, you would find we have multiple languages licensed by ICASA, and it's not always that all the listeners are proficient in all those languages. And so you can use these tools to assist listeners and obviously open access to some of your content on live content as well. So let us advocate for sector-wide capacity building programs. I'm winking towards MDDA here. Let us advocate for sector-wide capacity building programs so that AI becomes a tool for empowerment and not exclusion. I think it's an opportunity, especially what MDDA and Google is doing at the moment, that one can look at how to incorporate even some of this broader generic skills around AI. To assist community stations in terms of transcribing and also maybe capacitate them with the tools. Number 3, AI building cohesive communities. Okay, so community radio strength, our strength lies in our ability to foster dialogue. Okay, so participation is key. Social cohesion is a critical product of what we do. And so AI can support this. How? Personalizing, number 1, audience engagement, AI-powered platforms that can facilitate interactive programming, gather real-time feedback, and connect listeners with shared interest or local initiatives. For example, AI chatbots on WhatsApp or Facebook can answer listener questions, collect feedback, and facilitate participation and polls or competitions. So that data is very critical and it's rich. So we want to use these AI tools to help us to analyze those and assist us again with program decision making and even outreach of our community broadcasters. Second bullet, under the AI building cohesive communities, some more supporting local languages and cultures. I've already spoken about the ability to use AI to help with transcription, but also data-driven community mapping. AI can analyze survey responses, SMS, and social media data, map community needs and interest, and stations can use these insights to design targeted outreach campaigns, identify underserved groups, and build more cohesive communities. Okay, so the fourth bullet, which is my last one, safeguarding public value, safeguarding the public value mandate. Now, public value, I've just grouped. When you look at the Windhoek Charter, it talks about owned by the community, supported by this community, and engaging local communities for content. So that's really a public value addition that we bring as a community broadcasting sector. So we are a driver of public value. If you don't see it like that, it's maybe just because you haven't framed it like that. But locally, when you go and find local news and you start looking at the development side or the humanistic side of news, that's where you start assisting your developing public value, your public value mandate as a broadcaster. So above all, the adoption of AI must be guided by our sector's commitment to public value creation. This means, number one, ensuring transparency and accountability. How do we do that? Community members must have a say in how AI is used. And there must be clear policies to protect privacy, prevent bias, and uphold editorial standards. So those ones are critical. Maintaining human-centered content. How AI should augment, not replace, the human stories and relationships that are the heart of community radio. So you can use tools to augment and to mine data and to point you towards the real stats and data from your community. But that's where we draw the line. Okay, so in conclusion, AI offers powerful tools and to enhance our content, develop new skills, and build stronger, more cohesive communities. It does. But its adoption must be intentional. So inclusive, and also we need to have always it must always be in service of our public value mandate as a sector. So let us embrace AI as a means to deepen our impact, our social impact within our communities. Thank you very much, colleagues. That's my contribution. I've tried to capture the two questions rather into a current state and also a possible future in terms of our thinking around AI. Thank you. I'm going to move over. Thank you, facilitator.
Thank you, Franklin. And then I just want to invite everybody now for a 15-minute Q&A session just on what we spoke about, community radio and AI. So any questions you might have to the CEO of the MDDA or the NAB Community Radio Committee Chairperson, either drop them in the chat box or just raise your hand to ask them any questions directly. Do we have any takers? Hi, Brenda, you can go ahead. Yeah. Brenda, I'm not sure if you're on mute, and then we'll go to Gustav afterwards.
Hi.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, good morning. I just I missed I unfortunately had a meeting, so I missed some of the discussion, but I wanted to raise a point that we're starting to experience. And this is getting vox pops from community. So last week we did a vox pop with on Sona, and we went into the streets asking people their opinion. And one person specifically told us, I don't want to give you my opinion because you're going to clone my voice. And then my family will be, it was very random. We were shocked. My family will be threatened to pay money because we then investigated this thing and found out that there are sometimes people are being kidnapped and the voice is cloned, and you send a message to your family, listen, I was kidnapped, can you please pay this money to these people? It was such a weird thing because it was the first time that we actually got a response like that. So we just wanted to find out, has that happened to anyone? Are there stories from the presenters? Have they heard of this happen? Because it's apparently something that happens in some parts of Africa.
And I mean, we've been seeing so many deep fakes all across the board. I think even if you look at YouTube, those ads using people's voices to spread misinformation in some cases. So I'm not sure, are there any other broadcasters that have experienced something similar to what Brenda has? It is deeply concerning though. but I'm not sure we have many on the call we have. Can I maybe just, I don't know, Franklin? Yeah.
So, so yes, Brenda, I know there is also even
Are you still online?
and look at authenticity.
Yes, sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. So I'm saying, Brenda, that it is definitely a case, and they also use Facebook and other social platforms in terms of your media content that you post, and they will use that to reconstruct, you know, bad content about you and use that to blackmail you, which is not authentic. So there are, fortunately for broadcasters, and I think content producers, there are AI tools that help in terms of assessing the authenticity, whether this is fake or not. So I think that's again where AI tools can assist broadcasters to at least give the guarantee to listeners to say that we will not do this. We do have a guarantee, and we also have a way to track and to assess whether content is true or false, you know?
Thank you. I hope you've been answered, Brenda. We now move on to Gustav. I see you had your hand up, Gustav.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, leaders. Gustav here from PV Radio in Paul. I am an internet radio operator for the last 5 years. And what we have found with using AI is that the tool is good as long as you stay within the guidelines and the laws that is available to us currently in South Africa. But I think we are still behind on where the legislation lies when it comes to using AI in broadcasting, because we don't have specific guidelines for using AI and where it needs to go. So my question is, where do we stand currently when it comes to the legislation of AI and the using of AI within radio sphere? Internet radio has been using AI for a long time, and it's working quite well, but there is still no guidelines, especially when it comes to internet radio in South Africa, on how do we implement AI in radio in South Africa without any specific guidelines, or am I speaking under correction? Thank you.
Thank you, Gustav. CEO, I see you also had your hand up. I'm not sure if you can take this one as well. CEO, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I wanted to respond to me, Brenda, adding on to what Ndade Franklin is saying. I think community broadcasters also have a responsibility to teach their audiences, the listeners, about AI and how they are using AI. And we have to emphasize that the use of AI would then have to be ethical. I think one of the challenges we have over and above the disinformation is the mistrust that people will have in how their audio and their pictures are going to be used when we capture them as media practitioners. So I would say, instead of waiting for legislation, because yes, none exists presently, we should develop frameworks that will chart a way of how media practitioners will be using AI to share information and disseminate information. And we have to give our listeners that level of confidence and saying, we assure you, we are only going to use your voice for this particular content. And yes, we will archive it, but it will be archived in this manner and way, and for this period. So we have to also be a little bit more transparent in the processes at the back end of how we produce these stories. And I don't think we must wait for government to put in place that legislation. We should be informing the framework at least on how we are going to be utilizing AI in our newsrooms and protecting the integrity of the content that we share and the information that we disseminate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, CEO. I think that was a well-rounded response. And I see there's additional responses in the chat as well. One from Nadia saying we need to develop internal guardrails for ethical AI use. And Ayabulela is saying transparency is key, onto the CEO's point. Editorial policies also need to be very open about how stations or newsroom use or don't use AI. I'm going to take one last question, which is in the chat. It's from Gagiso. He's asking, as somebody based in a rural area who runs a community radio station, how can we close the gap between AI-generated content versus what's happening on the ground on a daily basis? That can be answered by either you, Franklin, or the CEO.
Okay, just repeat that question.
How can we, as rural community stations, close the gap between AI-generated content versus what's happening on the ground daily?
Okay. I'm just going to put my mic on. Here it is. Okay, can you hear me? Good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
There's a bit of
can.
an echo. Just try again, Franklin. I don't know if it's because you're sitting next
can you
to
hear
a
me?
fence. That's
Can
fine.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I think that this is exciting, Kagiso, because yes, we still have a digital divide in South Africa. You have access and less access in rural, and sometimes very limited access. So that access, obviously, connectivity is key, but also to technology and skills. So that's where I was saying it's very exciting that we can then position community radio to deliver some of the skills where they are, in the localities where they are, in the districts or municipalities, but obviously through partnerships. So we need to look at it, more from a developmental perspective and say, how do we position ourselves to be able to bring skills to our communities that would in other cases not be available. So I think your question around how you then have to bridge that gap in terms of the lack that you might have in rural areas is for us to really strategically see how do we position the sector, and how do we provide support to to rural stations to rural stations to access this kind of support through partnerships. If you look at what MDDA is doing at the moment with the language publication and the support that Google provided, that's a very good example of how we can provide this kind of skills to stations. And obviously there's quite a lot. I think I've listed in my session some of those skills. I've not necessarily spoke to them earlier, but I think it's very critical that when we look at AI and the kind of tools that's needed within the broadcasting, community broadcasting sector, we need to find the right strategic partners to be able to bridge that gap. Okay.
We're now moving on to the second part of the program. So thanks again to the CEO of the MDDA and Franklin for taking all those questions. Thanks again to everybody for engaging in the chat. Now, the second part of our program is AI in content creation, news, and audience engagement. We will now kick it off with the editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News, Nisa Ali. Nisa, welcome.
Good morning, colleagues. Happy World Radio Day. I am firstly, let me express my gratitude at being invited to speak to you today. As the session started, government had actually put through a statement on World Radio Day, and I thought that there were a few bits of it that had been mentioned before that would be helpful to just raise within this forum. Radio remains the most widely used and affordable forms of communication and relevance among many South Africans. They have slightly altered the theme for this year, and I think that too sums up some of what has been discussed. AI is a tool and not a voice. It's something that is unavoidable within our space. And I thought that perhaps by starting off my discussion here today, or my inputs, I would deal with a few matters that is facing radio overall in South Africa. As the editor-in-chief of EWN, we provide news bulletins across our 4 stations. But I think that one of the things that is evolving for radio as a medium is how our reach is no longer just confined to provinces. While access to data may still be unaffordable in some parts of our country, other people are able to access our information on the go. It's more accessible from different provinces. And even we saw with President Cyril Ramaphosa's meeting with Donald Trump last year, that we had seen a footprint in the US choosing to find the information from the source. So I think that that is something to celebrate, in that while we are in the process, and I think radio professionals generally, we are really good at balancing who our audience is, as well as extending that conversation. And so technology has allowed for those conversations to reach further parts of this country and the world. The second thing I want to speak about when it comes to our industry, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who perhaps has sleepless nights about this, is the evolution of our audience, and how particularly younger audience, they're consuming news certainly in a very different way. With the local government, the local government elections is coming up. With the national election, we see the impact of influencers, we see the impact of video, we see the impact of people just, getting lots of information, and they don't have the same pressures to be able to deliver on if there's a fire outbreak or a road closure. And so I think for editors, it has provided us with, I'm not going to say a challenge, because I think that all of this, it's an evolution and it's part of our growth. It has made me think about, how do I diversify that audience? How do I ensure that I deliver for the radio audience, but at the same time, reach out to the new generation using personalities? And when I say personalities, trusted journalists, debunking facts that are out there, as well as using video effectively to further boost the content that we are creating. And then the third aspect that I think makes AI possibly very easy to want to delve into is the fact that newsrooms and resources continue to be slim. The industry, we are very privileged to have still so many young people wanting to enter journalism. And certainly for me, having lived sort of toward the tail end of the apartheid years and then into the media freedom space and in the democratic South Africa space, I have a very specific incentive to be here. But I'm so impressed by younger people who are choosing journalism in whichever shape or form. And so while those newsrooms are smaller, I have seen people who are so multi-skilled. I like to think that at EWN, we are breeding a new type of journalist, people who can do radio, who do piece to cameras, who are able to edit video and tweet, all within the space of a few minutes. The State of the Nation address yesterday, so I had been there, probably my 20th one. And again, it's a reminder of celebration for despite all of those things, there were so many media houses, so many journalists on the precinct, and finding creative and new ways of informing people about the State of the Nation address. So I think just in terms of starting off this conversation, those are matters that we are concurrently dealing with. We have all of those while we are looking at AI and what that presents to our industry. Last year, we met with the Communications Minister, Sali Malatsi, around any sort of legislation or frameworks. And a colleague said earlier on, the onus does lie on us to create those guardrails. And I think that we are creating them sort of as we delve and become more informed on what AI is. It is moving at a rapid pace. And I do think for professionals, I see within my newsroom, the younger generation, again, adapting far quicker. And so one has to be very mindful and very clear and intentional about what are these guidelines? What are we going to adapt and adopt? And what are we not going to do? Somebody also mentioned earlier on the clear disclosure of AI. And I have been seeing some places, some publications, the Washington Post, for example, has an AI search element on its website. Is EWN anywhere close to that? No. But those are some of the evolutions already taking place. And from a journalism perspective, we need to collectively, as an industry, look at what those guardrails will look like for us. I'm a member of the South African National Editors Forum, and I know that that too is something people are grappling with. Before I give you some tangible examples of AI and some of the things that has had me thinking, I want to speak about training and information, because the only way for us to be able to really make informed decisions is to undergo training. And there are so many wonderful courses available. I'm very blessed to have in my news space and in my editorial space, people who are really, their brains are so in tune with the changes and the developments taking place, and the apps and the products that are available for us to use. At the moment, we use AI to transcribe some of the interviews that we do, but there are a few other things that we are looking at. We are in no rush to jump on the bandwagon yet. We sometimes reflect on the fact that we could sit in analysis paralysis, but EWN ultimately, and I think for every single station, every single brand on this call, I am driven by trust and the legacy of this brand. So any decision that I make has to sit well within that. That is ultimately the most important imperative. That, with the changing landscape, is the only thing that gives our news brands, our journalists, our stations credibility and longevity. So trust is always something that when I consider what to adopt and what not to adopt, I'm very mindful of that first. And anything that comes close to jeopardizing that, I am reluctant to go into immediately. I'll give you a few examples over the past 2 years. I had a call from a municipality asking me how we felt about using AI-generated voice notes. So a MACO member would record their voice and somebody else would provide the information and then send it out. That's great. But if there is anything that goes wrong in that, it could cast aspersions on everything else that we deliver. So this was easily 2 years ago. Could I have a different approach now? Possibly. But certainly then, it felt too broad and leaving things up to other individuals to manage my brand for us to want to proceed. Like I said, could still happen, but authenticity and trust is the long-term game. The second thing, I watched a documentary last week, actually, on Netflix. And in the TV experience days that I have, if somebody wanted to be not to be recognized, we would film them with a shadow, and we would distort their voice. And this documentary was the first one I had seen where somebody was digitally anonymized. So Offense is speaking, but he looks nothing like him and he sounds nothing like him. And I was quite impressed with how far technology's gone. The one thing that digitally enhanced image couldn't do, it couldn't mimic emotion. The person, I mean, they were thorough with it, but it couldn't mimic emotion. I had been at a conference also 2 years ago in Namibia, where a European broadcaster was already in the space of creating anchors. And so depending on the demographic or the country, they would get an AI-generated anchor. But what makes radio special is the connection. What our younger audience is looking for is the association with somebody. They need a sense of familiarity. They associate more with people than they do with a brand. The New York Post is the New York Times, sorry, is the only publication that markets its name. Sidi Madia, our politics editor, had always been one of my biggest examples of people resonating with people. We had struck the balance with EWN as a brand, but people were tuning in based on her. And so AI cannot mimic emotion. They cannot give you the human connection, or it cannot give you the human connection. And I think that that's something we need to capitalize on. Somebody mentioned earlier on language as well. So even from a moderating point of view, to those of you who have social media platforms, people like to engage, and not all of us have resources to be able to moderate. And from a South African perspective, having many official languages is something that I am exploring and looking into, but one of the things that does make us unique. And so whether AI could jump in on that space, I think is a little bit more complex than anywhere else. And secondly, from an accent point of view, a lot of the programs that are available do not sound South African. And when you are trying to build a connection with an audience, that too I view as a possible hamper. From a business perspective, so I manage the business of EWN as well. And I'm sure my colleagues on the line, you too are having to navigate budgets and everything else. With the advent of AI, we have found that there is a reluctance to click on articles. And so the AI function, searching all of the content available, gives you a quick summarized version. And that has had a bit of an impact on the number of people clicking on our content. And then the second aspect is, of course, AI is only as good as the information that we put into it. And so I often say to the reporters, be mindful of what you put in, because that information is then also distributed. So I think to summarize, these are just, and it's my nature. Ultimately, I want to see the longevity of our industry. I want to see the relevance of our industry. We are only 32 years into democracy. South Africans are still owed and deserving of news that is free and fair. We cannot run away from AI. And perhaps in 6 months, if we had an engagement, I would have a very different view. But for now, it is exciting. It's something that we all need to become really knowledgeable on. and something that certainly has brought a lot of excitement among my peers and in my newsroom, because you can take an article, for example, and turn it into a video. It allows us as radio people to extend that reach even further. Different audiences, different countries, and ultimately, that's why we do the jobs that we do. So on this World Radio Day, I want to reflect on, it's a medium I started my career in. It taught me my journalism, and to all of my colleagues on this call, let that never not be one of your North Stars as we navigate uncharted territory. Collectively, most importantly.
Thank you so much, Nisa. I think we all got a lot from all that you mentioned there. I think one of the things that stood out to me was the various uses of AI in the newsroom, especially the digital anonymization part of it. I'd never heard of that one before. So thank you so much, Nisa. We're going to now proceed to Mimi Kesaris from Gagasi FM. He's the H.O.D of Consumer Insights, Technology, and Innovation. Welcome, Mimi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to the NAB for the privilege of being able to be part of this panel. And once again, happy World Radio Day. So the first question that was put to me is from a consumer insights and data perspective, how is AI changing the way that us as Gagasi FM understands and serves its audience? So research for us here at Gagasi FM has been the bedrock of our success since we launched in 2006. So this is our 20th year as a radio station. We come of age next year when we turn 21, and we are looking forward to that. But AI over the last 2 years has really turned how we conduct our research on its head. For us here at Gagasi FM, AI has basically turned audience insights from a rear view mirror into a live dashboard, essentially. As we know, traditionally, audience insights were episodic surveys, music callouts, auditorium music tests that took forever, diary data that was largely retrospective, especially RAMs when we had it, and post-analysis. AI now allows us to move towards always-on audience understanding for real-time actionable insights. It helps us process large volumes of behavioral, survey, app, and digital interaction data far faster than manual analysis ever could. I mean, and that's an understatement. So essentially what used to take us weeks now pretty much happens in real time. It shifts us away from broad demographic segments towards, very importantly, behavioral and attitudinal signals. We're not just asking who the listener is, but how, when, and more importantly, why. For example, qualitative surveys and focus groups. Sure. I mean, imagine a focus group with 8 different segments sitting for an hour and a half, 2-hour sessions, and then having to analyze that, which before used to take weeks. Now we're able to get, those details and that information and those insights pretty much in days, where we're able to track sentiment in the form of a positive, neutral, and negative sentiment. And we're able to make decisions pretty much in real time. As a regional station, as Gagasi FM being the sound of KZN, of course, our biggest strength is proximity. We're close to our audience culturally, geographically, and emotionally. AI helps us scale that closeness without losing our humanity. And it's been mentioned on this meet a couple of times, how important humanity is, especially in this day and age of artificial intelligence. And we do that through sentiment, thematic analytics, and engagement metrics. The second question that was put to us was, which AI-driven innovations will have the biggest impact on audience growth and monetization for radio. From my perspective, AI amplifies relevance, efficiency, and commercial value. So for advertisers, it enables better audience matching, campaign optimization, and post-campaign analysis and measurement. We sell airtime and verified audience outcomes now, whereas before it was pretty much airtime. And this increases trust, effectiveness, and ultimately revenue. For example, we now have live dashboards across campaigns, whether it's a station campaign, a programming campaign, or a client campaign, where we are able to share dashboards with our advertising executives and, in certain instances, clients, where they are able to measure the digital aspect of that campaign and make adjustments should there be the need to do so mid-campaign to ensure that expected ROI is achieved at the end of the campaign. AI, as mentioned, improves efficiency, automating admin, boring admin, and in certain instances, reporting. And analytics frees teams to now focus on creativity, storytelling, and relationships, the things that humans are actually good at. We're listening better, we're responding faster, and we're staying relevant, which in radio, as we know, is everything. In my view, we need to view AI as an enabler and not a replacement for radio. Humans connect with humans, and it will always be the case. As was mentioned earlier on, with regards to artificial intelligence and mimicking human emotion, not at this stage, but who knows what the future holds with AGI, artificial general intelligence. Hopefully we'll never ever get to that. Also, it was mentioned previously with regards to disclosure. Last week, the Australian Broadcasting Authority made it mandatory for Australian radio to disclose artificial intelligence presenters and newscasters. And I can see other markets following suit with regards to that. With regards to AI as an enabler, for example, here at Gagasi FM, AI analytics allows us to augment social media reporting for aggregated actionable insights in real time. We are able to generate earned media and owned media reports at the click of a button, which allows us to make decisions in real time, essentially, and not retrospectively, which is or what was used to be the case in the past. And secondly, digital audio monitoring. We've seen how digital audio in the form of streaming and podcasts has accelerated over the last year and will continue to do so. And we are now able to track keywords and topics from a programming and a content perspective, but also from a client perspective, and are able to generate analytics around those conversations for client reporting and also, for our programming teams. And then also from analytics point of view, the ability now to track visual logo analytics. And this creates obvious monetization opportunities across the board. Another very interesting addition from an AI perspective is an earned media value metric for digital posts, which is calculated by predetermined formulas, is another new KPI for earned and owned media, as well as client campaigns in terms of measuring ROI. So posts that are published across social media, depending on the engagement and how those posts are perceived by respective audiences, a value is attached to that, which we're able to then determine the success or failure of the campaign that those particular posts relate to. And then lastly, LLM insights, large language model insights. This now allows us to track granular as well as macro industry trends and nuances. Here at Gagasi FM, we can pull a report in seconds over any specified date range, whether it's 7 days, 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, or even annual reports that tell us basically the radio industry across different markets. In this instance, it's our South African markets. And even geographically, as a KZN radio station, we are able to pull those trends for KZN specifically. And also, for example, aggregated personality ratings rather, across digital mentions that allow us to inform lineup changes, inform, emphasis on the word inform to assist us, and then industry insights appeal. So, for example, if you have an influencer campaign now, which includes on air, the digital aspect in terms of images and videos that are posted, we are able to track that in real time, analyze, what that particular influencer has done, posted, spoken about, and create a report with an earned media value attached to that. And the obvious appeal for clients goes without saying with regards to that. So in closing, stations with leaner teams are now able to operate at scale, able to pull share of voice reports across our different media platforms, social media platforms, digital platforms, app, websites, etc., and also competitor analysis. We're able to see exactly and analyze what our competitors are doing as they are of us, which again allows us to make informed decisions going forward. And as mentioned earlier on, from a community radio perspective, the challenge was always funds. But now in this day and age with AI, ChatGPT, you have a free version, but for 400 Rand, you can subscribe to chat and basically have a research agent at your disposal, a design agent at your disposal, and so forth. So it does level the playing field somewhat with regards to what community stations can now do as opposed to what they could do in the past. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for giving us that very clear picture of how we can use research and real-time insights to bring out our humanity in radio and deepen those connections we have with our audiences and listeners. Now, for me, the common thread in this discussion that's come out is trust. I think we need to build trust to keep our audiences, because without it, we lose our credibility. So I just want to ask everybody on this call now, in just one word, what do you think we should use AI to enhance? For me, it's definitely trust. So what do you think we should use AI to bring out in radio? For me, it's definitely trust. And while you do that, I'm going to invite our next speaker. He is Nkosinathi Ntuli, the business manager of Ligwalagwala FM and Ikwekwezi FM, the two SABC radio stations. Welcome, Nkosinathi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ofense, and good day to the panelists and also to the rest of the team. Thank you so much for inviting us as the SABC. It is our pleasure to be here. And I think let me first start by congratulating the newly appointed chairperson and deputy chairperson of the NAB, Philip Muilwa and Laura Cantor. We hope that they will continue to transform the radio landscape and the broadcasting landscape in totality. Now, as the SABC, we need to first start by indicating that the SABC is the biggest, is the largest public broadcaster in Africa. We are talking here about a broadcaster whose responsibility remains to inform, educate, and entertain the masses of South Africans, while reflecting, obviously, the country's linguistic, cultural, and geographic diversity, which is quite key and quite core. It's actually at the center of what we do as the SABC. We obviously are operating within a multi-platform space. And I think while we speak of radio, we should also understand the omni-channel approach that we have since adopted as the SABC, and the fact that it's no longer just about a medium. However, it largely centers around consumption, who our listeners are, how they want to consume us, and ensuring that we use AI, for example, as those enablers of easier access and better storytelling. So as the SAPC, we have 19 radio stations, and that is massive. And you can imagine that with such a number of radio stations, at the moment you start speaking of AI, you also need to understand the dynamics within which the SAPC as a broadcaster operates, the country it operates within, and also the reality of the unevenness in as far as access is concerned. We speak of AI, however, we should not forget that we are in a space, as things stands, of essentially a digital exclusion to some extent of some people. So as a public broadcaster, our responsibility is to respond to all of those within the space of AI. That is why we say, how do we rewrite educating, informing, and entertaining within the space and the age of AI? Now, I was asked, or rather we were asked as the SAPC, as to how can AI strengthen the SAPC's mandate to inform, educate, and entertain. And it starts exactly there. We need to be much more human-centered and not be so focused on the product itself. This is supposed to be an enabler and not the end, because from a broadcasting landscape perspective, as all colleagues have indicated, South Africa remains still divided. From a digital perspective, we still have those segments of our community that are not fully able to access all these, call them niceties, you would call them niceties, if you will. However, all these opportunities that are provided by digital as a new form of access, all those still remain a challenge within South Africa. However, as the SAPC, we feel that AI should be used as an enabler of access, not the replacement of radio. We're talking about extending radio content beyond live broadcasting through archiving, indexing, summaries, and clips. Such clips could obviously be clips that are much more shorter in order for them to respond to these dynamics that we're referring to, so that as consumers and as listeners listen to us and experience radio, they experience radio within the parameters that are accommodated by the dynamics that they live within. So that is what we as the SAPC feel is quite important in as far as AI is concerned. We feel that language should be preserved and language should be used as meaning, identity, and sound. So AI, we need to fully appreciate that while AI is there are dynamics within our language, within our identity, within our sound, that AI as an enabler is not yet there to fully capture. We are embracing AI. However, the human voice is still important in this context, because if you can imagine, with all official languages of broadcast in South Africa and African languages in particular, we've come to realize that AI has not fully grasped, for example, all our official languages. And as a result, if we do not use AI sensibly, we'll miss those nuances and those nitty-gritty that come with languages and their uniqueness, their tones, their identities that speak to the people that we are broadcasting for as a country. As a broadcaster. Now, global access to local symbols and stories, that is what AI is enabling us now to do. And it enables the SAPC's content to travel beyond borders, allowing global audiences, obviously, to access South African music, sports, stories, and perspectives without stripping them of their cultural grounding, because that is quite key to who we are in as far as our identity is concerned. And we do feel that AI is currently, we're in a very good space now of using AI to create interest while humans create understanding. And that is quite key. For example, we have, as part of our offerings, daily offerings on SAPC, we have our dramas. Our dramas, they are a mandate form of programming. However, the manner in which they resonate with audiences, that is something that AI cannot fully grasp. And as a result, we should not forget such elements. However, using AI, we then are able to create interest in such. We're able to create interest in these dramas and also use the archives that we have. As the SABC, we have archives, for example, and these archives can be used, and it's what we are currently working on now, using such archives to better capture the stories that were told in the past, to better retell some of these stories, because the essence of who we are is captured in those stories. So use AI to better tell those stories, for them to remain contemporary while they do not lose the essence of who the South African consumer market is and who the South African audiences are. And I will give you a practical example here when we look at AI in creating essentially experimentation within the public service value space. The current PBS station of the year, Ikwekwezi FM on SABC, one of the songs that we're competing there for the song of the year is a song that was created using AI. However, that song was quite good, and that song met all the standards that were put by humans, and humans ultimately become going back, by the way, to the point that was raised earlier around how to ensure that we remain trustworthy within the space of AI. The human voice came in there and ensured that this song created by AI still falls within the parameters that are stipulated by the station. Secondly, that this song, while using modern means of connecting with audiences, is still a song that is able to compete in a space where human touch is needed. So obviously it didn't win, but the truth of the matter here is that is where AI is going, and we cannot not recognize the presence of AI in this context. Now, we already are in spaces where we are engaging with a number of other stakeholders. We've just entered into a partnership now with Microsoft, and that is now where we say AI can be used, just like what was indicated earlier by Nadia, in that we need to move away from these abstract terms and make them as easily understandable from a listener perspective. So instead of just leaving it at AI, let's make it as simple as possible for it to be easily understood, not only within the broadcasting landscape, however, for it to be easily translated to where consumption happens, to where our listeners are, to where our consumers are. So those are some of the elements some of the projects that are currently underway within an SABC perspective and a public broadcasting perspective that respond to the presence of AI within the dynamics of the South African landscape. So we should not also forget that we need to respond in this space by understanding that our consumers still need low bandwidth and also realistic innovation, because one of the mistakes that tend to be done when innovation becomes primary is that we end up creating the most sophisticated mouse traps and forget that the people that are bothered largely by mice do not and cannot afford some of these sophistications that we are including. So instead of us being realistic, we also have as a business environment, as a business landscape or business practitioners, we also have a tendency of being so oriented around the product itself and forget who the consumer is and who the user will be. So being realistic in our innovation using AI will also assist, because from a country perspective, as South Africa, we still are within that space wherein our people still can't afford data. They still continue to say data must fall. Obviously, it is falling now, hopefully. And we need to then be realistic in our innovation. And also ensure that we, using AI, we have operational efficiencies within this complex space. How do we do that? We use AI to assist with repetitive tasks such as transcription and content logging, and obviously allowing editorial teams and across different platforms to focus on storytelling, community engagement, and quality. That is quite key then in as far as AI is concerned. So those are some of the realities that we have to operate within while we have AI advancing in this manner. However, South Africa being a country that continues to have this huge digital divide. Now, there also was a question around what editorial and ethical safeguards we should put in place to ensure credibility, the credibility of the public broadcaster. I think, like I said, trust has been mentioned quite a lot. However, may we not forget the human element in what we do. A human editorial authority should be non-negotiable across the broadcasting landscape, across the radio medium. And we need to use now AI to to support workflows here. But finally, responsibility for accuracy, meaning, and context should always reside with human editors, should always reside with the human component of what we do, because ultimately AI can make mistakes, but also we do not want to find ourselves in a situation wherein meaning is lost as we focus on technology itself. Now we need to start again, make meaning and not just be fixated on automation. Now that is again going back to where AI becomes a tool and not necessarily the end goal here. So AI can generate outputs, but it cannot explain the world and hold emotional accountability. So these functions remain human-centered, particularly within the SABC's perspective of public service broadcasting and creating public service value. Transparency is key. I indicated earlier the inclusion, for example, of a song such as that one. It is imperative that we remain transparent. It needs to be said so that it is not something that is hidden in the terms and conditions or somewhere peripheral. It needs to be quite clear within the broadcasting landscape where AI is used, so that the trust component that we are talking about continues to be strengthened. And one other thing is that we need to also be cognizant of the cultural and linguistic stewardship. Native language editors remain responsible for validating AI-assisted outputs. That is quite key. We should not forget that. We should not forget the fact that we still have these languages that are not yet fully captured by AI. And as a result, in our continuous usage of AI, that should also be borne in mind, not only by the SABC, but all our industry colleagues, so that we ensure that the cultural nuances and the linguistic stewardship remains with the human element within the broadcasting landscape. And we also need to bear in mind that augmentation and not replacement of human labor is quite key here. We need to find ways of bridging the gap between the usage of AI and also understanding that human labor still remains important from a broadcasting perspective. Now, as we move forward, as I conclude now, Offensive, I think we need to ensure that we avoid a technology-first approach as broadcasters. And I'm saying that because there are elements that still continue to require a human engagement. And I normally use a very typical, simplistic in a way, however, quite important example here. And that is a radio station's calendar, a radio station's actual physical calendar. You give a calendar to a listener. However, we still have not yet fully understood what the listener receives. Now that speaks of the engagement and the connection that radio stations have with their listeners. It's not the calendar that listeners receive. They receive a piece of their favorite personalities, a piece of their favorite, or rather their language, the language that they speak on a day-to-day basis, a piece of something bigger than just that piece of paper. So we need to understand that engagement then happens within those spaces. So we need to move further and not just see AI as the end here. Ensuring that AI does not flatten language and culture, that is quite key. We need to maintain also trust as broadcasters, and ensure that we manage skills and capacity gaps. And how do we do that? The digital literacy challenges that we have, we should also understand that we still have them within the broadcasting landscape. So how equipped are our personnel within the space for them to understand the ethics around AI? They first need to understand and keep up rather with the technology as it is, and AI as a form of technology. So it is also our responsibility to ensure that we capacitate them in that manner. Now, as I close, I want to state that the SABC's position is clear. AI should expand access to our symbols, sounds, stories, and knowledge locally and globally. But communication is ultimately about connection, and that is quite key. That is what we should be doing. Radio's power lies in human emotion, making meaning and parasocial relationships, and that will remain the center of public service broadcasting regardless of technology. And as I close, there's something that was written that's quite beautiful, that was written by Ntuli today as we celebrate World Radio Day. Ntuli says, radio must remain a space where real voices speak to real people, where presenters stumble, laugh, cry, and connect, where communities hear themselves reflected, not simulated. And with that, I go to, there's a scholar called Faye Olubodun who once said, for the foreseeable future, the African consumer will remain a villager. And with that, essentially, he says, we should always bear in mind the realities that, that the African consumer, the African radio listener is consuming this medium called radio. So there are all these elements that should always be at the center of what we create and how we create. And that essentially will be the essence of how we engage with our listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nkosinathi. Very brilliantly captured. And I have to agree with you that as we innovate, we have to remember that people are at the center of what we do. So we should always keep that in mind as radio practitioners. And also AI can be a powerful medium of preserving our heritage and our diversity. So I think it should also inform what we do as well. So thanks again, Nkosinathi. Much appreciated. So we'll now have a very short Q&A sessions. I think we'll just take 2 questions, and then the executive director of the NAB will officially close the session for us. So can we have the first taker, please? Can also leave your questions in the chat box, that's fine. But also just to remind everybody that the conversation does not need to end here. Always feel free to reach out to the NAB or the MDDA. And then we'll also share Franklin's handout at the end of this session. I don't think we have any questions. So Nadia, I'll now hand over to you to officially close the session for us.
Great, thank you. What an incredible morning celebrating radio. I think so many takeouts, and as human beings, I think we need to like go and absorb all of this and take it further. Just want to thank Aya and Offense for pulling this together, to thank Shoeshoe, Franklin, Nisa, Mimi, Nkosinathi, you were all amazing. So much to think about. I think as an industry, there's so much work to be done. What we do want to encourage is within this month of February, we're taking it as an entire month of celebrating radio, sharing experiences, sharing insights, learning from each other. So what I want to propose, Offense, maybe you and Aya could talk a little bit later about how we can, have a few more of these sessions. So much to be said, so much information today. And I think, sitting here, just listening to these incredible experts just reminds us about how we live in such a unique and fantastic radio environment, broadcasting environment. And one of the things that the NAB has been really trying to spearhead is this whole issue around succession, mentorship, skills and capacity building, learning from the experts on this very call, is how do we get young professionals around the table? How do we continue to sustain the sector? Because if we don't keep young minds engaged, and thank you, Nisa, for reminding us that young people are actually coming back to journalism, that there's a real push for that. That's absolutely fantastic to hear. But if we don't get young people on board who are having these critical conversations in all its complexity, we are actually not going to open the door for greater things to develop. So from our side, a huge thank you. Thank you to the MDDA for partnering on this. It was fantastic to see more than 100 people on this call. We want to keep the conversation going. So for especially our speakers and contributors, if you have time in the future during this month, we're going to pick your brains again, because this was absolutely amazing. We want to kind of stream some of the key takeouts, and we want to start continuing the conversation. I think the common thread here is our creativity, our authenticity, how we trust in the medium, how we use the technology as an enabler, how we actually embrace it in a positive manner. And I think, the next steps really, we want to continue and not just end the conversation. So we're going to reach out to you. And if you've got any further ideas and suggestions, please bring them to us. But just to say, happy, happy, happy Radio Day. We have much to celebrate in this country, and I know that we've got so much more growing and learning to do. So thank you to everybody. As I said, reach out to Fense or Aya, and a huge, big heart from my side, because my younger people in my house keep saying to me, it's old-fashioned to do this, but I'm going to do this because it's I heart and I love radio. And I think we all do. So huge congrats, big thanks, and keep that, as they say, volume going up. And in this age of AI, we know that we are human. We know that we can connect. And I think we know that we are the storytellers. So let's use the tools to enhance that storytelling, not to tell our stories for us. Take care, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks, Nadia. Thank you, everybody, and happy World Radio Day.
Thank you, colleagues. Have a beautiful one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.